All right. We are back. Michael Collins awake and ready to learn. That's awesome. Uh, JGG, what's going on, Jose? How you doing, man? And Bedbug, yeah, I've been keeping an eye on that. You guys are sweltering over there, and so here in the States, like we start with the air conditioning, then build everything else around the air conditioning. Um, I don't know how you guys do it. I really don't. And I also just remembered I didn't adjust my stream settings in OBS, so hopefully this is not we're not gonna have a hitch like we did last time. But yeah, Europe is it's rather hot. It's pretty amazing. And I'm pretty excited for today solely because the US is playing soccer tonight, so or football as the rest of you call it, you know. And yeah, looking forward to that. But looking forward to this as well. We've got our Bern chart up. So this was a recommendation from somebody from last week when we were doing what did we do last week? We did what did we do last week? What was it called again? It was Salzburg. Yeah. And that was a fun one. And this is an interesting scenery or an interesting approach. 30. You know, my brain. I lived in Europe for a number of years, but my brain still doesn't compute degrees Celsius. It just doesn't work. Like once you grow up with one, you don't really. The other one doesn't really work. It never really registers. But this is quite an insane approach. And two thank yous at the beginning of this video. Number one, at the beginning of this stream, rather. Number one, 30C. Yeah. Yeah, in Peru, it's probably cool, no, I would guess. But anyhow, thank you to Navigraph for letting me use the charts and for their beautiful app and everything else. And also hey Peter, how are you? Good to hear you. Good to hear from you. And the other thing is Orbix gave me the scenery for this airport, which is a fantastic scenery. We'll see that once we get in the plane in the mighty 152 and go fly the approach. But I'm going to stop fidgeting in my seat here. So the real kind of quick overview of this approach. There's several things that are kind of unusual about it. The first thing is the missed approach. I mean, that's kind of the first thing that stands out. There is terrain around here. There's plenty of it, and there's a lot of looks like towers around here that are spiking up out of the ground, and some of them are pretty high. I mean, that's 3379. That's like 1,500 feet above the ground. Yeah, 86. I sort of know those, but like, you know, when somebody tells me it's 80, I know what 80 is. When somebody tells me it's 90, I know what 90 is. When somebody tells me 30, like I sort of understand it's warm but not hot. But if you tell me 35, like I don't really know the difference, you know? It's like those subtleties. You just landed in Lowe's from somewhere in Belgium, I would guess is where that is. So there's a lot of terrain around the airport. There's a lot of obstacles around there. There's a lot of obstacles around the airport, and there's obstacles you can even see right here underneath the hold. And there's some interesting things about the hold that we'll get to in a bit, but you can see the missed approach is sort of meandering, right? The black dotted line is always the missed approach. And you can, missed approach is usually, climb to whatever altitude, turn on such and such a heading, go direct to a VOR, go direct to a waypoint, that sort of thing. Whereas this one, you kind of go that way, then you turn this way a little bit, then a little bit that way, then over here. Very unusual for a missed approach, and you can see how long the instructions. So they always give you the instructions in written form, and visually in the profile view, or the plan view rather, and you can see how long the missed approach instructions are. There's a lot of information there, so that's very interesting. Um, and there's also some interesting notes about the hold, like I mentioned. There's some interesting things about the runway. There's some interesting things about the approach. There's several things on this approach that I've never seen anywhere. Um, so we'll get to all that. It's a very unusual approach. But we're gonna go through it, and hopefully we can put everything together and be able to acquit ourselves well of this. So this is Bern, Switzerland. This is in the mountains. I don't know if they're like especially high mountains for Switzerland. It seems like just rather hilly. Last week in Salzburg, there was definitely some crazy mountains there. But this is the ILS or localizer runway 14. Only category A, B, and C airplanes. So that's anything up to 140 knots. So basically no jets coming in here, and you'll see why as we get to it. Looking at the briefing strip here, what we usually do is, left to right from the top, you got the weather. You tune in your comm radio there and listen in for the weather on the ATIS. Bern arrival, which is a little bit different than in terminology than I'm used to. I've usually hear approach or departure, but Bern arrival on 127.325, and then Bern tower, they have two frequencies for that. And my suspicion is it's probably coming from different directions. But the asterisks on the arrival and the tower frequency just mean they're not in operation continuously. So you would have to check and see when the tower and the arrival service closes. Now, if we come down to the next line, this is the information for the approach itself. So this is the localizer frequency, and that is 110.1, and that's what you tune into your nav radio. And the IBE is the Morse code identifier. And when we come down here, you can see 110.1 IBE, and you can see the Morse code symbols here along the bottom, so you know what to listen to if you listen in via your nav radio. And again, you can actually listen. It's broadcasting. It actually broadcasts the Morse code frequency over, or the Morse code identifier over the frequency, so you can listen and you'll hear the Morse code, so that you know that the ILS DME is in operation. Final approach course is 137. Glide slope intercept is at 4,000, and that's 2332 above the touchdown zone. So you can see that the runway is almost 1,700 feet above, almost 1,700 feet MSL, mean sea level. And so this is not a super high airport, but it's up there. And then the minimums, the decision height minimums, we refer to the minimum section below. We'll get to that in a second. Airport elevation is 1675. The runway elevation or touchdown zone elevation is 1668. And it's actually the runway elevation. It's not the touchdown zone elevation, because this is, as we'll see shortly, this is actually not an instrument runway, which is a very unusual thing regarding this approach. Minimum safe altitude, ARP. What is ARP? So normally the minimum safe altitude is based on either a navigation, like a VOR, it might be a waypoint, it might be the ILS, but this says ARP. So that's airport reference point. And what that means is, so if you think about this, if you put LSZB into your GTN 750, right? Where is the airport actually located? Now, there's a taxi chart. Now, for an airport of this size, I mean, it's not really that confusing. But if you think about an airport like Atlanta, say, which covers, probably, I would guess, dozens of square miles at least, right? Where is the actual airport? It has to be a specific point. And we're looking here at the taxi diagram for Bern Airport, and you can see right here it says ARP. It's the airport reference point. So when you dial your when you set your GPS to this airport, it's going to this exact point, because otherwise where are you going? You know, this runway is a mile long, and you have to have a specific yeah, that is a good check ride question, is it not? And you have to have a specific location where that actually is. And why anybody would go parachuting is beyond me. But that is a different matter entirely. So our minimum safe altitude is based on that airport reference point. So what are our minimum safe altitudes? So if you're north, basically northwest of the field in this sector, it's 7,200 feet. So if we're up here on the plan view up here, it's 7,200 feet. To this little sliver here from the southwest is 10,700 feet, and then to the southeast it's 15,000 feet over in this direction. So there is, you know, presumably some pretty high altitude terrain around here. But you also see this note right here, this number 1. And if we look down here on the plan view, you can see right here it says there's the number 1. It says 8,900 feet within 12 nautical miles. So when you're within 12 nautical miles of the airport, your minimum safe altitude goes down from 10,700 and 15,800 down to 8,900 feet, which is useful to know. And again, minimum safe altitudes are altitudes that you might use in an emergency or a situation where you might not have all of, you know, you might be low on power, you might be have one engine out on a twin, that sort of thing, and you need to know what's the lowest altitude that I can go down to before I have to really start worrying about hitting anything. And while I think about it, you guys should check out JGG Pilot's YouTube channel. He's doing some great stuff, so go check out his channel when we're done today. But now here we start to get to the kind of the really interesting stuff. Now the missed approaches, they tend to make them as simple as they can, because they don't want they want it to be easy to follow, they want it to be easy to execute. It's generally a stressful situation, and you've gone missed for a reason, and they don't want to make it overly complicated unless they have to. But let's read through, and you can look down here and see the overhead. So this is the ILS inbound course. This is the runway, and the dotted black line here is the missed approach. And so that's what we're going to be reading right here. You can follow along. Does it mean I can descend to 8,900? It means you can if you have to. I don't know what the IFR altitudes are around here. It's basically an emergency altitude, or an altitude you can use if you have to. So let me see what the altitudes on the airways are around here, if they show them. This is okay. So if you look here, minimum altitude on this airway. So this is geo-referenced. So the runway is overlaid. The chart is overlaid over top of the terrain. So the airport is right here. Down here, you can see the minimum safe altitude is 10,700 feet. And that's interesting. So the minimum altitude on that segment of the airway is 10,000 feet. Let's see what it is if we get over here, which is a little closer to the airport. But basically what it means, minimum altitude there is 8,000. There's got to be somewhere over here where the minimum altitude is higher than the MSA, I would assume, anyhow. Not there. But normally what it is that these airways around the airport, like what you would be flying in on before you start the approach, would normally be higher than the MSA. And then the MSA means that if you need to, you can descend below that, but it's not a clearance altitude. In other words, like if you're flying IFR into Bern and the and you're on, let's say, this airway up here that we said the minimum altitude was 10,000 feet. That's the minimum IFR altitude is 10,000 feet. It doesn't mean that once you get within 12 nautical miles of Bern that you can descend below that minimum altitude. It just means that altitude will keep you clear of obstacles if need be. And it's I'm sorry, and I just realized the error of my thinking. So the minimum safe altitude in here is 8,900 feet. So it is indeed lower than the airway altitude. But it doesn't mean, Michael, that you can descend to that 8,900 feet. It's not really a usable IFR altitude. It's just an emergency altitude. You can see here, this one right here is flight level 110. That's 10,000. Flight level 10, I believe. That's 10,000. So let's say you were flying on this Z119 airway. Minimum altitude is 11,000 feet. And you had some sort of loss of power or something like that, in this area that you can come down to 8,900 feet before you really have to start worrying about hitting anything. But that's not an altitude you would get cleared to, if that makes sense. Minimum safe altitudes are just basically emergency altitudes. So when we're looking at, hopefully that answers your question, Michael. That's another great question, by the way. You ask at least one great question every week, and I really appreciate it. It makes me think. So the missed approach. So you're coming in here on the 137 inbound course, and you come down to, what would it be? So let's say we're in the mighty Cessna 152. You come down to 2,168 feet, which is 500 feet above the ground. You don't have the runway environment in sight, so we have to go missed. So what do we do? So the initial climb clearance is 6,000 feet. So that's the altitude you're cleared to without having to get any sort of further clearance from ATC. And the reason why they say that is, so you've got these hills around here. This is almost 4,100 feet right here. This is 4,000 feet. They don't want you staying at, let's say, 3,000 feet or 4,000 feet waiting for a further altitude clearance from ATC. They give you the initial climb clearance right to 6,000, so you can climb straight away and get above this surrounding terrain without needing any sort of approval from ATC. So you climb straight ahead to D1.3 IBE. Now that's the ILS DME. The ILS frequency has a DME, distance measuring equipment, so you're going to have distance measuring off of the ILS. So once you go missed, you would climb straight ahead until your DME reads 1.3. And that's after the ILS DME, which is, you can see it right here on the plan view. It's right located at the end of the runway. And we talked about this a little bit last week in the approach that we did last week. Then turn left, max 160 knots, minimum bank angle during the turn of 20 degrees to avoid Class G airspace. I mean, I would much more likely want to make that turn to avoid hitting anything. I mean, I'm not terribly concerned with Class G airspace, but so Class G airspace is uncontrolled airspace, which means anybody can fly in Class G airspace, and they don't have to have a clearance. They don't have to be talking to ATC. They don't have to be really doing much of anything. So you might not know that they're there. ATC might not know that they're there. And those are generally low, very low to the ground altitudes, up to 1,200 feet above the ground. So they're just warning you that there's uncontrolled airspace here, which I do find a little unusual because this is, it's an interesting note. I would be more concerned about making that left turn to avoid hitting this, for example. but you make that minimum 20-degree left banking turn to intercept the R222 inbound to the Willisaw VOR. Now the VOR is up here. It's not indicated on the chart, but the frequency for the VOR is here. This is the Morse code identifier again, which you would use to identify it. And actually, now that I think about it, so I've mentioned before, if you're flying something like a G1000 equipped airplane, like the G1172, or you have something with a GTN 650 or a GTN 750, those types of radios or those types of GPS units will automatically verify that the VOR that you're navigating to is in service, or it will also verify that the ILS DME is in service. In the 152 that I fly in these demos, I actually have to tune this and then pull the volume knob out and you listen for the Morse code identifier. Otherwise, you don't know if you're actually getting the VOR or not. And gladly, Jose. So what is the R222 inbound to the WIL VOR? So we come around here, we make this left-hand turn. Let me zoom in here a little bit. So here's the VOR up here. And remember, when we talk about radials radiate out. So here's the VOR somewhere up here. This 222 radial out of the VOR, if you are at the VOR, it's a 222 outbound course. That's what a radial is. You would fly 222 outbound. But this says intercept the R222 inbound. So we would actually intercept this. You would tune the VOR. You would tune your OBS to 222. And then you would fly. This is going to require some math. Then you would fly the 042 degree outbound. You would fly 042 degree outbound, inbound to the VOR. So you might ask yourself, okay, so why, if you're going to be flying a heading of 042 or a course of 042 inbound to the VOR, why do they give you a radial outbound? The reason they give you a radial outbound, two reasons. Number one, that radial will give you a distance. So that radial 222 outbound to 18.6 DME identifies this waypoint right here. And at that waypoint, you cross the D18.6 WIL at or above 5,500. So there's an altitude restriction here. Whoops, I didn't mean to do that. So you want to be at or above 5,500 feet right here, because there's terrain down here. And you also are going to start turning left again at D18.6 WIL, turn left. So you're going to have to be at 5,500 feet and turning left. And you're going to get two more radials. This one right here, the D, so we'll keep on going. Established on a track of 325. Now, the ground, they want you to fly a ground track. You're going to fly a heading, because if you have a GPS that shows you your ground track, you can obviously fly a 325 ground track. If you don't, and I don't in the 152, I'm going to fly a 325 heading. And then you fly that heading 325. Let's see here. When crossing the 234 radial, so you cross this 222 radial, and then you twist your OBS to 234, and your needle's going to move to your left, and then you're going to be flying towards that needle. When you cross the 324 radial, you turn left. You're going to have to turn your OBS again, your omni-bearing selector again, left to 243, and then you're going to fly, you're going to make a left-hand turn to capture this 243 outbound radial, 243 radial, all radials are outbound, to this Berkey, which is the waypoint that the holding pattern is based on. So you're going to intercept that 243 radial outbound to 23.9 off the VOR, and that's also going to be 8.3. This waypoint Berkey is also going to be 8.3 off the ILS. So again, you're going to have you can do it with two nav radios, and I confused myself doing it that way last week. Um, what is the diameter of the circle? It's normally 30 nautical miles, unless they have it designated otherwise. Unless you know differently, because you may know differently. But I think it's normally 30 nautical miles, is it not? Either that or 25, but I believe it's normally 30 nautical miles. So, and again, this is the type of thing that's more sort of difficult to picture and to walk through than it is to fly. It's actually not too difficult to fly. It's interesting. We'll see. And this is almost sort of a DME arc, which I've avoided any approaches with a DME arc yet, because DME arcs are a whole different thing. Let me see. So once you get to the Berkey intersection, Berkey waypoint, now where do we've got some notes here about the hold. Now, first of all, how would I enter this hold? Normally I would just do what I always do, which is a teardrop entry. And because these are standard rate, it's a standard holding pattern, right hand turns. So I would cross Berkey and then fly outbound minus 30. So 317 minus 30, so what, 287. So I would cross Berkey and turn right to a heading of 287 for 60 seconds. And then I'd start my standard rate right-hand turn around to the inbound 137, the inbound leg. Now, a couple notes about the hold. There's a minimum holding altitude of 4,000 feet, and which makes sense because there's things like this is 2,500 feet, and these altitudes right here are the altitudes you would read in your altimeter. So this is not above ground level. This is an MSL altitude. So this object, whatever this is, reaches 2,427 feet. If you were at 2,427 feet, you'd hit it. If you were at 2,428 feet, you'd miss it. But your minimum holding altitude is 4,000 feet. And you can see you've got a couple of these in this area, and some of them right underneath the hold, which is interesting in and of itself. So you're in the hold. Now, you can see there's a note here, number 2. What is that right here? So conventional navigation offset and parallel entries prohibited below 5,000 feet. And if you remember from last week, I told you I don't like parallel entries, and there's a reason why I don't like parallel entries. A parallel entry would be if you're coming from this direction, you cross Berkey and you go and you continue going out. So you basically have to reverse your course to come inbound 137 to Berkey. How do you do that? There's 2 ways. You can either do a teardrop like I like doing, which is like that. Or I wonder if there's a way I can make the color of my mouse different. That would probably be helpful. Oh, look at this. So you could do a teardrop, which would be like this, which is what I prefer. That's terrible. Terrible drawing. What I prefer doing is a teardrop, something like that. That's also terrible. What a parallel entry is if let's say you're coming from over here. Parallel entry, you would fly outbound like this, the 317 heading, and then you would start a turn, or a left-hand turn, even though this is a right-hand pattern, a left-hand turn around to intercept Berkey and then continue around in the hold. But if you can see, so there's a couple things. So generally on a parallel entry, you're going to be on the outside of this inbound course. You're going to be outside the protected airspace for the hold, which is the first thing I don't like, and that's why they say parallel entries are prohibited below 5,000 feet. They don't want you over here in unprotected airspace. But the other thing I don't like about them is you're making a left-hand turn, and a long left-hand turn. It's like 240 degrees into a right-hand holding pattern, which is confusing to me. So what I would do, whoopsie, I was trying to make my mouse. So even if I was coming from this direction, and you would think a parallel would be the correct hold entry, I would do a teardrop and just go like this. And I'm gonna work on my drawing. It's just safer. It's easier to think about. And it's just a much easier way to do it. And now I know how to draw on the chart, which is awesome. So what else is going on with this hold? There's a maximum holding altitude of 11,000 feet. There's a maximum airspeed of 170 knots. And let's see. So another caution note on the chart. There's actually a couple caution notes on the chart. We'll come back down to that here in a second. So transition level is by ATC, which I don't really like. That basically means if you're coming into land, ATC is going to decide when you should change from the standard altimeter setting to the local altimeter setting. And the transition altitude, which is for departure, is 6,000 feet. So if you're departing out of here on an instrument approach, you would change from the local altimeter setting to the standard altimeter setting of 1013 at 6,000 feet. So let's see, caution. Now this is some interesting stuff too. This is a fascinating approach. Final approach restricted to a maximum of 140 knots. Now I don't know, Jose, maybe you could tell me, would you be allowed to fly this in an A320? I mean, I don't know if you're legally speaking a category C aircraft, or if you just fly category C speeds sometimes. But anyway, the final approach course speed is 140 knots. Caution, non-standard approach angle, and it is very non-standard. The next caution note we have is airspace class E at or below 5,000 feet outside center Bern. VFR traffic without radio communication and without transponder must be expected. So you may have VFR traffic that's flying around here that's not in contact with ATC. They might not have a transponder, so even if you have something like ADS-B, it might not show up. So the traffic might not display at all. So basically what they're telling you is keep your head on a swivel, which is somewhat disconcerting in an IFR environment. But and what's conventional navigation offset? So basically those are for stuff for jets. If you're flying if you're flying something with an FMC and you're flying an offset inbound to an offset course inbound here. So in other words, if you're flying, let's say a course of 317 from the south to the VOR, you could offset that using your FMC like a half mile to one direction or the other. You're prohibited from doing that below 5,000 feet just because of the terrain around the area. I don't know why you would do that in an approach environment anyway, but hey Edie, what's going on? 25 nautical miles. JGG, awesome. Appreciate that. And the other note, I mean, there's no shortage of notes in this chart. It says right here, non-instrument runway. Now, what does that mean that it's a non-instrument runway? So in order to be an instrument runway, the runway has to have certain elements. It has to have certain lighting elements like centerline lighting and threshold lighting. It has to have certain markings like some of the bars that are painted in the touchdown zone, that sort of thing. And when it says non-instrument runway, what that means is this runway doesn't have some of that. You don't know what it might not have, but you can expect that it's not going to be as easy to see as a normal instrument runway might be, and we'll see a little bit more about that as we go down. And this is it's a fascinating approach. Now again, there is a localizer portion of this approach. We'll come back to this part in a second. So this is the profile view. This is what the side view looks like as you're flying it. So you would intercept the glide slope at 4,000 feet. That's the Maltese cross. There is the final approach fix glide slope intercept, and that's D6.3 IBE. That's 6.3 nautical miles off the ILS DME. You would intercept that at 4,000 feet, inbound 137 degrees, and you would fly the glide slope down. Now, what is the glide slope? If we come down here, ILS glide slope or localizer descent angle 4 degrees. Now, standard ILS glide slope is 3 degrees. So this is a very, very steep glide slope, very steep glide slope. And so accordingly, the descent rates that you're going to have to achieve in order to get down on the glide slope are higher. So a 70 knot ground speed, you're going to have to be descending at 500 feet a minute. At 100 knots ground speed, you're going to have to be descending over 600 feet a minute, 700 feet a minute, just to stay on the glide slope, which is crazy. For 140 knots, normally 140 knot glide slope would be around 732 feet a minute. So on this one, you'd have to be descending at just about 1,000 feet a minute. Let me see. ILS. Let me see what the ILS was. This one I know. Let's see. So you can see there, 140 knots is 1,000 feet per minute. This one, 140 knots. That one's steep as well, 355. So let's try this one. Okay, this one's 3 degrees. So this is a standard 3 degree glide slope. At 140 knots, you're descending at 743 feet a minute. At 70 knots, you're descending at 372 feet a minute. If we look back here at the one we're looking at 70 knots, you're descending at 500 feet a minute. So it's significantly steeper an angle and requires a much steeper descent rate than normal. So they give you the altitudes. These are the DME altitudes off the ILS transmitter. So at 6 nautical miles, you want to be at 3880, and that's the altitude you would see on your altimeter. At 5 miles, you'd be at 3455. At 4 miles, at 3030. And those are mostly for the localizer, because the localizer, obviously you don't have a glide slope. So this just gives you an idea as you're coming in. Am I descending at the rate that I need to hit these numbers? And then you're approximately on the glide slope. And it says, let's see here, the MDA for the localizer portion of the approach is 2,400 feet. And this would be if you're either flying the localizer approach, or if for some reason you lose the glide slope on the ILS, then you would only be able to come down to 2,400 feet, which is 732 feet above the runway. So it's still relatively high. This D3.4 indication is another altitude that you can use. So at 4 miles, you want to be at 3,030 feet. At 3.4 miles, you want to be at 2,776. The missed approach point for the localizer is the D2.5 off the ILS DME, but you cannot continue descending down and go missed down in this area. What you would do is you'd come down. Once you hit 2,400 feet, you level off and fly straight ahead, level at 2,400 feet until you hit D2.5. on the ILS or on the localizer, the transmitter, the DME transmitter. And if you see the runway at that point, you can then descend and land. And you would be 700 feet, and you'd have a mile and a half to descend. So it'd be a rather steep descent if you saw it at 2.5. But you would have to level off at 2400, fly along to the missed approach point, and then either land or go missed. Michael, if in the top slip, caution note, final approach restricted to maximum. That's an excellent question. That's a really good question, Michael, and that's a question I asked myself, and I don't know the answer to that. I couldn't figure that one out either. Why they would give you that if you're not allowed to fly it. So, now we saw this note above, non-instrument runway, and it says ILS uncategorized. Now, normally you have either Cat 1, Cat 2, or Cat 3 ILS categories, and those are kind of different levels of precision on an ILS and with increasingly lower minimums. This one is uncategorized, which kind of coincides with it being a non-instrument runway. Basically, what they're saying is like it's a very non-standard ILS procedure, and don't expect the normal level of the normal minimums that you might expect on an ILS. Like the minimums on the ILS portion of the approach. You can see here for category A and B aircraft, those are airplanes that go up to 120 knots. So category A is 0 to 90 knots. Category B is 91 to 120 knots. Is 2,168 feet, which is 500 feet above the airport. So the ILS minimums are 500 feet above the runway, which is very unusual. ILS minimums are usually 200 feet, maybe 250, but a 500-foot minimum on an ILS approach is pretty unusual, and it's partly because of the steep descent rate, partly because the runway doesn't have the markings that you would normally expect for an instrument runway, but it's also because of the missed approach climb gradient. We'll actually get to that in a second. So when you get down to here's the lighting that you expect at the runway. It does have a high intensity approach light system, so it's got the rabbit, the lights, running along the ground, leading you to the runway. It has runway end identifier lights, so those are the two flashing lights at the end of the runway, and it's got a PAPI, which are the 4 red and white lights on glide path lighting on the side of the runway. So my instinct tells me that if it's got all this lighting, right, and it's still a non-instrument runway, the reason is probably because it doesn't have the normal touchdown zone markings, the paint, the stripes painted in the touchdown zone is my guess. We'll see here, because it's got a good amount of lighting for a relatively small airport. Now, so the missed approach climb gradient minimum. So if you go missed, let's see, and let's see, so this is okay. So these are different climb gradients depending on how or different minimums rather, depending on how well your airplane can climb on a missed approach. 6.4% up to 3,300 feet. That's what, 1,500 feet above the airport, roughly, or 1,800 feet above the airport. So a 6.4% climb gradient, that's 389 feet per nautical mile. I think the standard climb gradient is 200 feet per nautical mile. Standard, 1 second. I think it's 200 feet per nautical mile. Yes, it is 200. So this is almost twice the normal required climb gradient. And what this means basically is if you're able to climb at 389 feet per nautical mile, then you can come down to 500 feet. If you can only climb 304 feet per nautical mile, you can only come down to 584 feet. If you can only climb at 152 feet per nautical mile, which may turn out to be the case in the old 152 today, we'll have to see, you can only come down to 1,100 feet above the ground. So basically, the better you can climb on the mist, the lower you can go on the ILS. So let's say, so what does this translate to? 389 feet per nautical mile. So if you're going 120 knots, that's 2 nautical miles a minute. You would have to climb at almost 800 feet a minute to be able to make this, to be able to use these minimums on the ILS. And I don't know if the 152 could do that, but you would calculate it beforehand using, your weight and everything else. Here you would have to be able to climb at 120 knots, but I'm going to be climbing out I'd be climbing out probably closer to 80 knots. So it's going to be a much lower climb rate that I'm going to have to achieve. So I can probably use this in the 152. The other thing, it's one unusual thing after another on this chart. You can see it's got this number 1 here next to the ILS and next to the localizer symbol. And you see down here, straight in training approach, decision altitude is 3,000 feet. That's 1,332 above the runway. In other words, if you're doing instrument training, or you're doing approaches, you're an instrument pilot and you're doing approaches in VFR conditions or whatever, and you're practicing ILS approaches or you're practicing the localizer approach, you cannot come all the way down to the ILS minimums on your practice approach. You can only come down to 3,000 feet. So clearly they want people to be extra careful about about flying practice approaches to this runway. And visibility minimums for the approach, 1,500 meters, which is about 4,500 feet. So that's like 7/8 of a mile, 6/8 of 3/4 of a mile, about 3/4 of a mile probably. So yeah, and you get the visibility minimums or you get the visibility readings from the weather that you pick up on the ATIS here, 125, 13 when you're coming in. So, and then number 2, this note right here, MDAs on the localizer approach. So that's when you're not using the glide slope. VNAV, I don't know, maybe if you, let me see. So if you were flying this you couldn't fly this using GPS. So I don't understand that note. Maybe, probably if you have, so VNAV decision altitude. So let's say you were flying this localizer approach without a glide slope, but you had a GPS unit that could give you what we call an advisory glide slope. It's not an official legal glide slope. You can't really use it legally, but it just gives you guidance on the descent for the localizer approach. You can use that in lieu of the minimum descent altitude of 2,400 feet, depending on operator policy. I don't know what that's a new one. That's unusual for me. The Hitman, good to see your face. Help me a lot. You're quite welcome. Thanks for joining. Appreciate it. So this is kind of an unusual note too. Don't quite know what that means. So it's a lot to have gone through. I'm going to make sure that something in particular is not loaded on my computer, and it's not. And I'm going to start the sim so that we don't have the debacle like we did last time where we were waiting for the sim to start for a week and a half. So basically what you're going to do to fly this approach, you're going to fly to Berkey at 4,000 feet. That's right here. Or no, I'm sorry. That is not, you would basically, let me see. Do they have an initial approach fix even listed on this approach? That's another thing that's unusual. It's another thing that is unusual. Let me see. I don't see, and it's syncing data. I don't see an initial approach fix at all. The Willisaw VOR is not an initial approach fix. The ILS localizer transmitter is not an initial approach fix. This is not an initial. I don't see any initial approach fixes on this chart at all. So basically, the only way you would fly this is if you're getting radar vectored to either Berkey or to D6.3 IBE. So you would be getting radar vectored to this point right here, D6.3 IBE, and you start your descent on the 137 degree inbound course. And look at that little nasty thing. The way to see it, indicated airspeed and glide slope theoretically should match in a zero wind condition, since there's almost. You're right. That's ground speed. Ground speed. That's a very. That's a. So, ladies and gentlemen, JGG Pilot just answered that great question from Michael. Why they give the 160 knot descent rate on an approach where the final approach speed is restricted to 140 knots. That 140 knots is indicated airspeed. This is ground speed. So let's say you had a 20 knot tailwind and you're going and at 3,000 feet above the ground, which is where you'd be intercepting. You'd be about 2,500 feet above the ground right here. You're gonna be flying, or 4,000 feet, MSL. You're gonna be flying a faster true airspeed anyway. So if you've got a little, your indicated airspeed could be 140, and your ground speed could be 160. That's a very, very good point. And I've said before, I don't know everything about this stuff. And one of the things I really love about doing this is it makes me verify things, and I've had some great questions, and I've had some great help, like that one from Jose. Thanks, Jose. I appreciate that one. So this is ground speed. So you could be going 140 knot indicated airspeed inbound, but still have 160 knot ground speed. And that's something I always make sure to point out, is that these descent rates are in ground speed. Just blanked on that one today, which happens. So that's why they give that 160 knot ground speed. But yeah, so you just come down the course 137 inbound on the ILS, depending on what climb rate you can, or climb gradient you can achieve on the missed approach, determines what minimums you would use. I'm thinking the 152 is going to fall into this category right here. So I'm thinking my minimums are probably going to be 584 feet above the ground. That's 2252. It basically gives you another 100 feet, and I'm going to have to make sure I can climb to 5,500 feet right here if I go missed, which we will. So you come down. If you don't see the runway, then you go missed. You climb straight ahead to the 1.3 DME, then you start your left-hand turn over here to intercept this 222 radial off the Willisaw VOR. Start your left-hand turn to a heading of 325. Pass this this radial here. Again, start your left-hand turn to the outbound 243, which is going to take you to Berkey, and then you enter your holding pattern. Yeah, the EU it's you. I don't know if anybody here is from. There are some people from the UK. Your ATC services and that stuff in the UK is just completely weird. Basic service and very unusual stuff. So I think I'm going to use. I'm going to use auto FPS for this flight because I might need it. I got my settings like cranked up right now because I've been doing testing. And let's see here. There we go. Let's check our fuel. I want more fuel. I want more fuel. Let's manage our fuel. I don't know why you have to click that button. Let's manage our. I want more fuel. There we go. Okay. Because we all know that on occasion I have been known to run out of fuel. I'm gonna go live weather because the live weather I think is pretty cool in this part of the world. And oh yeah, you guys are just staring at the screen, the LSZB. Hello, LSZB. All right, and let me get myself set up here. And the sim is running rather slowly. So, let's see. Whoopsie. Okay, there we go. There's me face. Let's see here. Okay, so that is the airport identifier, correct? LSZB. Looks like we're gonna have some weirdness here again with the sim. I mean, maybe it makes more sense just to use 1,500 feet above the ground. We had this last week, or Tuesday rather. And I don't know why it's doing this. This is not a good sign. No. Let's see if it'll use any of my other. Why is it behaving such? Okay, that took a while, but all right. So let's go runway 14. Okay, all right. Let's cross our fingers and let's cross our fingers and hope that we get what we like here. Basin approach. Intermediate fixed to be glide slope intercept, hopefully 4,000 at 6.3. Use autopilot to fly this and free up some workload to talk to us though. Hopefully my brain works well enough that I can, although I have no guarantees. I don't, and as a matter of fact, I don't have an autopilot in this plane anyway, so so I won't be able to use autopilot because I don't have one, but it's funny because last week on Tuesday it sort of did this same thing and we had to wait patiently. And you were talking to the world's least patient person, by the way. So hopefully this loads here pretty soon. I always kind of question myself, should I just load the sim at the start of the discussion so that by the time we get to this point it's going to be all set, but I am going to, so I'm going to have to tune in 110.1 and 116.9. All right. I don't know why it does this, because normally my sim, it even did the syncing data bit on Tuesday. So apparently there's snow in Interlaken right now, which I doubt is the case. So we'll just have to wait patiently. So what have I been doing in the sim the last couple of days? The last couple of days in the sim, I have been flying from Sangster in Montego Bay, Jamaica to Fort Lauderdale ad nauseum. I've flown that flight probably a dozen times in the last week, and I'm doing performance testing with auto FPS, with dynamic settings, with different settings in the sim. Are we go? And I'm going to be presenting my findings here pretty soon, which is going to be fun. But I've flown that route more times than I care to. But the good news is, Jose, my Airbus landings are getting better because they couldn't get worse. I can see the airport. Which is good. But yeah, I've just been testing. I basically have an optimized performance profile at this point. I've been testing the stock sim versus auto FPS versus dynamic settings, and it's been interesting. It will be even more interesting when this flight loads. I gotta figure out why it's doing this. But, and see, I thought I had launched the sim early enough during my chatting earlier that we wouldn't have to sit here waiting for this. But here we go, ladies and gentlemen. Now this is from Orbix, this scenery, and it is phenomenal. It's a really cool little airport. Let me get all that set up. Now you can see some of the cool things about this airport. First of all, you can see the terrain around here. I don't know if that's actually snow this time of year, but who knows? But you can see all the towers that are marked on the chart. And there is a grass runway over here. This is the main terminal on this side. There's a grass runway over here because there's a glider club over here, and this would be a great place to fly gliders, which I have not done in the sim yet, by the way. I need to try that. All right, so let's load our chart here. And first things first, 110.1. We'll load 110.1. And then I'm going to load 116.9, 110.1, and that's going to be 137. I'm going to see if I can use my brain power, use the excess brain power that I have. 116.9. See if I can use any excess brain power to be able to use both VORs at the same time, or both receivers at the same time. Because I tried this last week and I confused myself. Let's see, 110.1. Always make sure your frequency is correct. That's very important. 110.1. Alright, and I'm going to put this on 116.9 just to be safe. If I do confuse myself, then I've got to back up. Alright, so right now, the DME, which is right here, the DME right here is giving us the ILS distance. The distance from the ILS. Alright. Open this up just a little bit. So, here we go, ladies and gentlemen. We'll go toes on the brakes. Verify our fuel quantity here. Lest we run out of fuel once again. Alright, release the brakes. And what I put, oh yeah. Well, here's what we'll do. Alright, takeoff power is coming in. Takeoff power is set. Engine instruments are in the green, both of them. That's about how many engine instruments I have. I set it up to be on. Yes, I have. I took my first glider lesson when I was 6. Or no, when I was 6. When I was about 10. And it was a hoot. And look at this view. So I'm just checking my auto FPS settings here so it can. So let's see here. 137. So we're gonna fly straight out here, and we're gonna fly the hold, and then we'll fly, because on Tuesday, remember, I forgot that we can use the holding pattern to turn around. That's what it's there for. So we want Berkey. Well, really, we want D6.3 at 4,000 feet. Very interesting, this whole approach, because normally I would expect to have like an initial approach fix over the airport and then an outbound heading to turn around, but they don't give you that. So we're gonna fly 317, which is the reciprocal of 137, and that is a little bit to our right. So I'm gonna start getting an idea of what the wind is like. Should probably let the nose come down here just a little bit. And got myself off there a little bit. So let's keep going in the climb here. I got off to the side here a little bit. Oh, I've got photogrammetry on, so we're gonna get, wow, we're gonna get a lot of scenery. This is what happens when you do testing and you don't pay attention to your settings when you're trying to do something else. So D3.4, 3.5, let's get that needle centered here. Alright. I'll lean the mixture here a little bit. Yeah, it looks good, no? So photogrammetry is great, and I used to have performance problems with it, but I'm not now. Which is pretty nice. Alright, D4.1. Whoopsie. No, don't you get all excited now. But yeah, it looks tremendous. Look at this. I mean, it's stunning. And it is turbulent here today. All right, so once we get to 4,000 feet, we'll level off. I mean, it's just stunning. Absolutely gorgeous. All right, there's coming up on 4,000 feet. Let's level off. And that needle is reverse sensing because it's 137 with a 2 flag and we're flying the reciprocal, so if that needle gets a little bit off to the left, I have to correct to the right to get it back centered. Now remember, the course that we're trying to fly is 337. There's 6.5. Okay, so Berkey is 8.3. Let's see, wind is variable at 3 knots. Yeah, I don't know what the wind aloft is. But what radial do I need? I need a from flag and a 222 with a from flag right here, which is what we've got. The other thing I need to do is not get any higher. 7.2. Once we hit 8.3, then we'll make a look at this. Absolutely stunning. There should be a tower right in front of us somewhere. Alright, there's 8.3. We're going to make a left-hand turn to outbound minus 30, so 287. Get to 287. 285 is pretty good. Turn time, so we got to start our timer about, we'll start it at 10 after. Twist we don't have to do because we've already got the 137 inbound heading set. So now we fly outbound for 1 minute. And the reason I didn't do that is just because then I would have to twist the needle again if I had to. And as a matter of fact, it's actually it's only the localizer on 110.1 only broadcasts 137, so it's not like even if I turned the even if I swung the OBS to 317, it would still give me a 2 flag. So you just got to kind of think your way through that one. There's no advantage to setting the heading. So there's that. So let's start our right hand turn here. Now we're making our right hand turn into heading a 137. There's a big tower right off there in front of us. I mean, you certainly could do that. It would just be one more step. So I just eliminated it, basically. So we're looking for 137 inbound. So if the 137 gets to this 45-degree mark and the needle is not coming in, then we'll just wait for a little bit. But that needle is coming in. Resist the urge to rush now that it's coming in. I'm just going to go through it a little bit. So there's gotta be a westerly wind, a southwesterly wind. Go about 145 and try to bring that needle back. So there's gotta be like a southwesterly wind right here. Caution wake turbulence. Alright. We'll do one more turn in the hold here. There's gotta be a westerly wind. Is that... D9.3, so we got a mile to go here. Getting that needle back in. So I am technically outside protected airspace right now, which is not what I want to do. So now we'll come back to 137. Right about yonder. There's the runway in front of us. We're going to do one more turn in the hold here. Just so I can get a better feel for it when we have to do it in the bad weather here in a second. There we go. Alright, so standard rate right hand turn. Turn time, twist, throttle, talk. So let the nose come down. This scenery is stunning. So coming around to 317. I mean, it's just... So it should take... I should have timed my turn, too, because it should take exactly 1 minute to make a 180-degree turn at standard rate. Alright, so... We'll do it at the 40. We'll do it at the 40 mark. So I would think there is a southwest wind at altitude that blew me right through the inbound course, is my guess. But we will verify that. And then what you would do if that were indeed the case is you would adjust your outbound heading. Right now I'm supposed to be at 317. I'm not. But if I go through the inbound course again on the way on this turn in the hold, then what I would do is maybe fly an outbound heading of 300 to correct for that wind that's coming in this direction and pushing me toward the inbound leg. Alright, there's 1 minute. And that's why you make your turn standard rate with the little airplane right there. You get the wing right there on the hash mark. That's the reason you make standard rate turns, because that way you know you're in no wind conditions, your turn radius is the same both directions, or both times, not both directions. But you're essentially making two equidistant 180-degree turns, in theory. See, that needle's coming in already, and I've still got... Yeah. So there is indeed a southwest wind. Not too bad this time. Much, much better. So I might fly like a 310 heading the next time. But this time, what I'm going to do is fly the ILS. Just gotta correct, and now we know that the wind is coming right to left now. So at 8.3 that's Berkey, and then at 6.3 we can start our descent. So I'm gonna hold, so 137 is our inbound heading. I'm holding about 147 right now to get this needle back and also to correct for the wind. And I don't know that it's gonna quite do both of those things at the same time. So let's try 150. Alright, needle's coming back. Alright, now, first thing I'm going to do is add carb heat. The engine in the Cessna 152 has two purposes. Number one is to produce carburetor ice. Number two is to produce power for flight. Carb heat protects us from carb ice. Now I'm gonna go, let's see, at 6.3 we intercept the glide slope. I'm gonna go, I want to slow down because it's gonna be a steep descent anyway. About 145 is pretty good as a heading. And just a little bit more power. I'm not going to trim right now because I want to be able to release the yoke and start coming downhill here once we so the glide slope needle is already coming below us, but we're not at 6.3 yet, which is somewhat disconcerting. We'll go notch of flaps. There we go. Now I'll go. So heading of about 145 is good. Now we gotta catch that needle, because if this needle goes all the way down to the bottom, we have to go mist, and I don't want to do that. I'm gonna go mist anyway, but let's see. Airbus, you're flying Cessna. Man, I can't believe the scenery. It's amazing. Alright, we're holding that 145. 80 knots, so yeah, so we see how we're gonna have to maintain like 800 foot per minute descent to get down. Mixture is rich. Holding that 145. Unable. That's the word that so many pilots forget. Unable. Alright, let's see. D 4.0, we want 30-30. So now I'm gonna bring, and always expect a wind shift around 1,000 feet. Ready to copy. There's 4.0, 3,030 feet. We're spot on. I've actually never gotten a number to copy, I'm proud to say. So I'm gonna have to zoom out here a little. Boy, this is gonna be interesting trying to read the missed approach instructions. D 3.4 is 2776, so we're good. Try and read the the missed approach instructions. Climb straight ahead, 1.3. Climbing left turn. Intercept the R222 inbound. Alright, 2400 for 2252. I'm gonna go missed at 2250. We're going missed. Carpet cold, mixture rich. Climb straight ahead to 1.3. So we got time. We got about, what, about 3.5 miles almost that we can use to climb, and I need it because we need to get to 5,000 feet right here. Am I going to be able to? No. See, the problem is that I can only get the DME off the #1 nav radio. That's the problem. So we are going to have to... click that. We have a number for you to copy. I love that. 0.76. So we've still got a ways to go. We should, yep, we should in theory be right over top of it. So see, there's the grass runway. And there's the glider club right there. It's fantastic. The scenery is just awesome. Bring that notch of flaps up there. Alright. So we're gonna keep a climbing. Keep a climbing. So this should give us a DME distance here pretty soon. Otherwise, that's pretty mean of them to tell us we can pick it up if we can't. Because we are flying straight towards terrain, which is no good. Alright, if I don't get a distance here in a second, I'll just start my turn. Look at this. We get to do this at home. We get to do this at home. I'm going to assume it may not indicate it in the sim. So let's go minimum 20-degree turn. Climb into 5,000. OBS has got to go to 222. And that's a from flag. That's what we're looking for. And now to intercept that 222 radio, I don't want to turn too much more. right, so just want to get that 222 off of the bottom here, otherwise I'm just going to parallel it the whole time. So I'm looking for D18.6. It's 22 right now. $5,000 feet. Alright, I'm going to let the nose come down. Alright. Yes, this is default scenery. And it is photogrammetry. I mean, it's amazing. The airport is not default. The airport is Orbix. And the airport is fantastic. Alright, so that needle's starting to center. I mean, look at this. I can't get over the fact that we get to do this at home. Alright, 5,000. That needle's starting to center. So once that needle centers, then I want the reciprocal of 222, 220, let's call it. So we'll make a right hand turn to 040, which is a good idea to do right about now. Actually could have done that sooner. Alright, so now we have intercepted the radial. We need to come about, let's try 035. So there's what we want is the reciprocal of 222, which is 042, until 18.6 DME. And then cross 18.6 at or above 5,500. Oh, 5,500. Well, good thing to read there, Mike. So we'll climb to 5,500. Reading is important. That's why they write it down. And then we climb left on a heading of 325. Yeah, it's incredible. Well, you get better views than we do, Jose. Alright, there's a 18.6. I just passed it. Alright, so now we turn left heading 325. I'm going to tune this now to there's 325. Now I'm going to tune this to 234. And then when that needle centers, then we turn left. We got to turn this again to 243. And again, this is not too bad. Because it's gonna give you the wrong flags, and it's not gonna give you the correct sensing once you're doing the outbound. It's just easier to do it as charted, because I would have to do reciprocals of each of these. So and you can see we're at 17.5 DME right now because we've got a wind out of the west. So that's blowing us from the west toward the VOR, which is to our right. So if I wanted to, I could actually fly about a 320. but it says 325, so that's what I'll fly. And once this needle centers 234 with a from flag, then I know I'm right here at this point where they want us to start the turn. So then I'll turn it again to 243. Look at that. Those numbers are right on. Alright, so now start our left-hand turn. It says max 210 knots. I think for us we can probably just be a little bit more gentle over here. So 243 is what we want. Alright, I'm just going to hold that 2-4 right over here on the left hash mark until that needle starts coming in a bit more. Yeah, so you are actually flying the 043 degree heading, or 042 degree heading toward it, but your needle, you want your needle with a from flag, and what was it, 222. So once this needle centers, we'll turn left to 243. I'm actually going to want to descend in the hold down to 4,000. See, there we go, 243. Now we got a 243 with a from flag, so we're heading right towards Berkey intersection right now. And if I set this to 110.1, which is the ILS DME, when both of these needles center, when this needle centers, we're gonna be right at Berkey. We'll be right at Berkey. So let's see. 137. It wouldn't be reverse sensing inbound on the even though you're flying 042 heading with the 222 radial, you're flying inbound to the VOR with, you know, the reciprocal of the radial. You're not going to get reverse sensing because the flag is from. So even if you're over here to the right, the needle will be to the left. If the needle is to the left, that means you're over here, and that 222 radial is to your left. If the needle's to the right, that means you're over here, and the 222 radial is to your right. So you wouldn't get reverse sensing actually, even if you had if that makes sense. So you. But that's also exactly why I just fly it as they chart it. So let's go nasty weather. Everybody ready for nasty weather? Let's go nasty weather. Give me nasty weather. Yes, now we're talking. Whoopsie. So D23.9. I'm gonna bring some power out. What do I want? Right turn to 287. In the descent. Alright, at the 50 mark. Now this I want to tune back around to 137. Alright. And I'm going to switch this. So now I've got DME off the ILS. Another 5 seconds, we'll start our turn here. We already have started our turn, I just didn't mean to. IFR training stroke. Alright, so. Now. Continuing my descent to 4,000. Doesn't it feel like you're leaned over way more than you are? Either that or it feels like you're straight and level, one of the two. So I'm going to keep an eye on that needle. Already starting to come in. It's actually not starting to come in. Now it's starting to come in. 4,500 will come down to coming down to 4,000. Look at that, ladies and gentlemen. Now at I'll hold about 145. Still coming down to 4,000. That's our minimum holding altitude. Whoops. Alright. And I think at 4,000, I'm going to pull the nose up here. And lose some airspeed. Alright, so D8.5 at D8.3. I'm not gonna do another hold. We're just gonna go straight in here. So 150 looks like a pretty good heading. 6.3, we should get the glide slope. One to go. No. We're not doing that. Okay. Half mile to go. I'm gonna add, let's go carb heat. Go notch of flaps. That needle should be right there. 6.4. 6.3. All right. You can see how the slant in the cloud? That can really be a nice visual illusion sometimes. All right, so now we gotta start going downhill. All right, 3,900. No, 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 we gotta start going downhill. Downhill. Downhill airplane. Downhill. Come back left a little bit. Alright, I'm gonna call it a 2200 this time. And we'll fly the mist in the muck here. Alright, 3,500 for 2,200. Come back left a little bit to 145. Airplane doesn't seem to want to cooperate on the descent here, so I'm gonna pull some power out. Alright. 3,000 for 2,200. Where's the duck on the glow sheet? That's a good question. Alright, 3,000 for 2,200. Fixation is what happens when you get too focused on one issue. Like, I was too high and I was focused on correcting that, and what happens is then you get off laterally. 2,600 for 2,200. No, 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 no. You're gonna wind up with a full deflection here. Alright. Missed approach. Establish a positive rate of climb. That was not the cleanest ILS I've ever flown in my life. Coming back left here. Coming back left to about 140. Alright, let's clean up the airplane. Flaps coming up. This is important. Make sure you keep climbing. Focus on your attitude indicator. Keep that nose up. And we'll go around one more time and see if we can't make it in this time. Mixture is rich. Carb heat is off. Flaps are up. Alright, we're looking for 5,500 feet total. Once we hit, I don't think it's going to give us the DME. Alright. Boy, I love this weather in the 150. The thing is the minimums on this approach, 500 feet. So, I mean, it's tough to get in. Not easy. Just watching that attitude indicator, trying to hold it right there about 10 degrees because the nose keeps wanting to drop. 3,300 climb, or 3,700 climbing 5,500. Now I gotta bring this down because I gotta be able to read the missed approach instructions again. So left turn to intercept the R222. Whoopsie. So we're roughly there. No, not a right turn, a left turn. Minimum 20-degree bank. Make sure I got that bank right because that's more important than twisting the dial right now. Alright. 4,300 climbing 5,000. Alright, so I've got that 222 radial out here. Start leaning the mixture here just a little bit. No, 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 no. Let's not, again, don't stop climbing. The way to kind of think of it is that 222 radial is like this on my heading indicator. .4. We want 18.6. 5,300 climbing 55. Hey, Simviation, what's going on? How are you? Alright. There's 55. Pay attention. Power and... Alright, and there's the centered needle. We'll make a right-hand turn to a heading of 042. Ooh, whoopsie. So I was trying to read right there. .6. And then at the 18.6, at or above 5,500, turn left 325. .6, turn left heading 325, and then 234 is what we want here. And you know what? Wow, look at that. Oh, that's 224, not 234. And you know what? This is reverse sensing. This is reverse sensing because I'm pulling the needle back to center. No, actually it's not, because my heading right now is 325, which is this direction. My heading is 325. So I'm basically exactly at a right angle. I'm flying this way to get that needle. Do you see that now? Can you see? It's so confusing. VORs are such a hoot. So I'm flying and heading a 325, which is this direction. So I'm flying towards the needle. Might be an easier way to think about it. And 243. Now that needle's coming back in. Get back to 5,500 here. Because I don't have the OBS tuned to my heading. Alright, so the way I thought of that one is I had 240 tuned in, but my heading was this way, was 325. So I was actually flying toward the needle. If I had the needle centered, or if let's say I was flying 242 toward the VOR, 243 toward the VOR, it would be normal sensing. So this one's a little bit confusing because we're essentially using it for we're essentially flying a DME arc, really, although it's not a distance arc, but we're flying an arc off the VOR, and DME arcs are a totally different way of enjoying life. See, and I'm trying to intercept 243 outbound, and that is to my right. This is 243, so I'm correcting to the right. You see what I'm saying? This is a little bit closer to a typical VOR setup where you're trying to intercept an outbound radial. So the needle is to my right, and my heading is 280, which is over this way. So we're still flying toward the needle. And this would be a heck of a lot more confusing to fly without the overhead. This would be a little bit more confusing to fly. Alright, now I'm coming left to 243. The way to remember it is, or the way to think about it is that the VOR doesn't know what direction you're going. And that's the key. That's kind of the key to understanding VORs. They don't know what direction you're going. They just know where you are. $23.9. Alright. I'm gonna review my own I'm gonna review radios myself, because I don't know 23.9 to what is it, 1.7. Alright, right hand turn. To 287 in the descent. You know, I'm gonna review my radio, like, because this is, I don't know if I would have gotten this right without the overhead view, to be honest with you. And that's the beauty of the moving map. Time is about 50 seconds. $287. I'm trying to come down to 4,000 here. I'm getting, my heading is not correct at all. Alright, we'll start our right hand turn here in a second. Alright, there's 50 seconds. Now right hand turn around to inbound of 137. Whoopsie. Alright. So 137 is what we're looking for. That needle should start coming in, I would think. It's not, so I'm gonna hold right here. The 137 is about on this hash mark here. And once that needle starts coming in, then I'll continue my turn. $4,700 descending 4,000. There we go. And about 145 was pretty good before, but we're through it, so we'll go about 150. Bring the needle back. Alright, 4,400 for 4,000. 150 heading, bringing the needle back. Hopefully, anyway. And this time, minimums, 2168. Going right down to minimums, we're going to try and catch this. 8.3 at 6.3. We are in the descent. I'm going to go carp heat on. Yeah, do that and I'll take a look. 155. Still that needle's getting... So that wind has changed. Trying to get that needle back in here. Alright. Notch of flaps. Power to 1900. Why is that right needle not coming back in? Because I am too left of course, that's why. Let's try 155 for a while and see if that'll do it, maybe. Even 160. Oh. Oh, gyroscopic drift, ladies and gentlemen. I just adjusted my gyro. And it was off by about 15 degrees. Now that needle's gonna come back in. Alright. That makes a little more sense. I'm still gonna hold it at about 150. Alright. 3,300 descending 2,200. Let's try 145. A little bit of power in. About 147 maybe. No, 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 no. We don't want to level off here, ladies and gentlemen. Alright, 145. Oh, this is not pretty. $140. Let's try 140. $2,700 for. Got the pappies. Okay. Still on the needles because that's a more accurate estimation of where the runway is than my guess. Alright. Another notch of flaps. It's hard coming out of flying an ILS like that and then getting your brain focused on flying visually. Power's out. All right. All right. So, let's go. That was a tough one. That was a tough one. Because you literally have to read the missed approach instructions. Otherwise, there's just no way you're gonna get it. Let's come over here. Where can we park? A fine looking line of aircraft right here. Man, that was tough. I don't know that I've ever had an ILS, a missed approach rather, that I literally had to read to make sure, I mean, every word to make sure I got it right. Carb heat is off, we'll go flaps up. Lights coming off. Mags off. Master and battery switches off. So, let's see how, the compass, I mean, at least once an hour. I mean, every half hour, check it. But let me see. Yeah, it is hard to. So what I was thinking with so let's see here. When we had this to 222 for this outbound right here, for this radial rather, call it what it is, a radial. So 222, and the needle was over here to the right. But my heading was like, was basically like, let's see, about northerly, right? So I was intercepting because the needle was to the right, and I'm going towards the needle. Like basically, if the needle is to the right of the radial and I'm going in any of these directions, any of these headings, I'm going to be intercepting that needle. The confusion comes from is the fact that the OBS was tuned to 222, but that's not my heading. And the key thing to remember is that the VOR doesn't know where you are. Or it doesn't know what direction you're going. It just knows where you are. So with this set to 222 and the needle to the right, I had to fly one of these headings to intercept it. So it was correctly sensing. It's just the presentation of it is very difficult to kind of understand. If I had been down here heading in that direction and the needle was to the right and I was going on a heading of 240, or it would have been the other way around. It would have been like 060. It would have made more sense. It's confusing. You can see the passengers cheering. It's just confusing to visualize it. Does that make sense? So it was 222 and the needle is in this direction, and my heading was actually somewhat like this. So I was going toward the needle. It just because of how everything was oriented, it didn't really look like it. Because if you think like, so my heading, oh, sorry, that's my wife calling. Give me 1 second, guys. All right, sorry about that, fellas. So hopefully that makes some sense. That was my wife calling. So hopefully that makes some sense. It is confusing. It is a little confusing, but it's like I said, it's easy. I was actually going to switch to the map, but to the chart, but it's easier to understand looking at it. So hopefully that makes some sense. Send me that screenshot in the Discord, and I will have a look at it, and hopefully that'll make it easier to answer the question. But the other thing I'm going to do right now is show you this beautiful live weather. Let's see. There we go. And this beautiful airport. And it's just cool stuff. So, I didn't even put my flaps up. How good is that? So, there's a headless human being right there. Let's see. If I walk over this way a little bit. So hopefully that makes some sense. But you know what? I even if that does make sense, I need to be better at explaining that, and so I'm going to get better at explaining that. VORs are one of those things where when it clicks in your head, it just clicks. And before that, it's sort of difficult to understand, and then after that, it just makes sense. But that's not the explanation you want from somebody who's trying to teach it to you. So, there's a really cool, thing over here I want to show you. I don't know if anybody's actually been to this airport, but they have this thing. So airports have these, are all fenced in nowadays, and you can't go in them. But a lot of airports have like viewing platforms, where you can go like watch the airplanes and stuff. And check this out. They put this globe, this viewing globe, inside the fence, so you can go up the stairs, come in here into the globe, and get a view of the airport and watch the watch the planes take off and land and so on and so forth. This is from Orbix. So if you guys want this scenery, it's from Orbix, and it is fantastic. And other than that, I am going to wrap it up. It's been almost 2.5 hours. This was a fun one to fly. It might have been a little. Might have had a few too many elements in it to make it like a really good teaching approach. But somebody asked about it on Tuesday, so I thought I'd do it. But we'll be back next Tuesday with another one, and I'll try to pick something a little more straightforward, even though this was definitely interesting, and there's a lot of interesting things to learn from this approach, but it's sort of advanced in the things that we were looking at. So I hope this was good for you guys. I enjoyed it, and some great questions again. And I really just appreciate everybody coming out and joining me. If you want to support what I'm doing here on the channel, I have a link in the description for my Patreon. You could also join the channel here on YouTube. There's a button down below. Yeah, you can always check the website, IslandSimPilot.com. I have the schedule, for when I'm going to be doing the classes on there. And yeah, I look forward to doing this again next Tuesday. I thank everybody again for coming out. Take care, guys. Have a good rest of your day.